Okay, today we're going to talk about something very different, brain health. In India, about 7 to 8% of individuals who are above the age of 60 actually suffer from dementia.
Isn't there a connection from gut to brain?
Yeah, the gut-brain axis.
There really is.
There's a lot of conversation in the scientific world that dementia or Alzheimer's disease is the third form of diabetes.
The brain function-wise, taking a mushroom supplement, is it something that is beneficial, or am I just following a fad that some people are talking about on Instagram?
People who I see above the age of 60, creatine is on that prescription for them, not because of muscle, but specifically for improving brain function and improving brain health as well.
And I think we all, in professional athletes or sportsmen and women, we're focusing on our physical health.
Yeah.
But there's not a great deal of focus on the mental health.
Okay, today we're going to talk about something very different, brain health. I think a lot of the conversations we have in health, longevity, high performance, we sort of focus so much on the physical body, but you know better than I how much of the game is won, in the muscle between the ears. And I'm certainly beginning to see it a lot more in my older clientele. How cognitive decline, dementia, memory loss, lack of focus, this is all beginning to play very heavily on their state of health and wellness as they get into the older years. So it's something I thought we could talk about today, just sort of setting the scene. In India, about 7 to 8% of individuals who are above the age of 60 actually suffer from dementia as a formal diagnosis. And that roughly equates to almost 10 million people living with this disease burden in the country. Something I'm always fully cognizant of, probably because one of my very first jobs in medicine was in geriatric medicine, was that it's not just the person who's suffering from the disease when it comes to a mental health condition or a disease of cognitive decline. It's the people and the family around them. So I thought today we can talk about brain health, cognition, and see where we go from there.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was kind of looking over my shoulder and get another expert. I'm a cricket player. We don't often exercise our brain enough, I think, in the pressure and stressful situations. But it's something that's very close to my heart because my parents are both in their 80s. My father's 84.
Right.
His mental health is really sharp. Physically, he's a bit frail, but my mother's the other way around. Whereas her mental health is certainly something. The memory, and it's interesting how she'll remember stuff as when she was a child growing up, but that sort of 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes ago, she can't remember having asked the same question. So it's something that's really relevant in my experience because it's happening, in my family currently.
Yeah. That's really interesting how memory loss changes. So as you rightfully said, individuals hold on to those older memories for far longer, and it's actually the more recent memories that they have problems. Anecdotally, I won't ask whether you remember where your car keys are, but this oftentimes people tell me, it starts with the simple things like not knowing where the phone is, not knowing where the car keys are, and then slowly over a period of time this sort of builds up from there. But it's something that I am honestly very scared about. If from a longevity perspective, Dr. Peter Attia, who a lot of people follow, often talks about the 4 horsemen of disease, which are the 4 biggest killers. And there is cancer, there's cardiovascular disease, so heart, a stroke, a heart attack. There's the metabolic burden of insulin resistance and diabetes and everything that falls under that category. And then there's the cognition. It's the decline in cognition, the dementia. And we're now seeing a lot more of this in society, probably because we're living older into those years where these symptoms begin to manifest. And I think secondly, there's a lot of conversation in the scientific world that dementia or Alzheimer's disease is the third form of diabetes. We have diabetes type 1, which
Yeah.
is no insulin, diabetes type 2, which is sort of insulin resistance, and diabetes type 3 now, which is the effects of insulin resistance on the brain and the metabolic demands that this has and the cognitive decline. So I think it's a couple of things which are coming together, which we're now seeing so much of as well. Yeah.
And it's okay if I mention my mother. I mean, I don't want to be rude to her, or
Yeah.
I mean, it's real. I mean,
Yeah.
and as a family, I used to get frustrated that we're not living in Sweden anymore, Mum. It's been 2 years, but
Yeah.
just kind of me realizing that I would rather have to tell her again rather than not have her there.
Ah.
But it's been quite a decline in the last sort of 5 years.
Right.
So,
So she would have episodes where she thought she was still living.
no, we're still living in Sweden.
Oh, that you were
I
still
haven't
living
been
in
there for
Sweden.
2 years.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
living in India.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are the kids doing in Sweden? And
Yeah.
gee, we in Cape Town and India. Not
Yeah.
Sweden was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Having asked, what's India up to at school 3 times in 5 minutes.
Mm.
So I mean, it's real. It's very real. And I think my dad has become so frustrated.
Yeah.
And so it does. It impacts. But I'm not too sure how much I can, without being rude to my parents.
Yeah.
But it's very real
Yeah.
in our situation.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think even anecdotally, if we just think about our parents' sort of social circles and their friends, something that I definitely noticed a lot more through the pandemic, maybe because of the lockdowns, that
Yeah.
especially in India, it was really, really severe. I don't know what the lockdowns were like in South Africa, but in India there was, and I think Sweden was much more open
Yes.
with it, right? It wasn't
Yes.
as
It
restrictive.
was no lockdown.
No lockdowns
No
at all,
lockdown,
right?
no.
Just that social isolation which it created, where the elder generation were not spending time either with the younger folks or even with their peers. I certainly started to notice a decline in function because of that in folks of that age. And I think that sort of talks about a much deeper aspect of society, because we are now seeing people live in much more nuclear families, disconnected from generations, and the creep of loneliness into society. Even though we're also connected, we're all
Yes.
connected on social and tech,
Yes.
but it's almost we're just living
Yeah.
these very lonely lives as well. Yeah.
But that's interesting, because in South Africa, we've always had nuclear families. I mean, we don't have parents living, there's no 3 generations
Right.
in families. And, a lot of guys that I work with here, their brothers are in the same apartment, and their families are, it's just an extended family.
Yeah.
Grandkids everywhere, grandparents. But in South Africa, I think loneliness, and the community has always been, like, my parents are living in a retirement community where there's 5,000 houses, so they have a big community.
Yeah.
And because they were both teachers, they know half the town.
Right,
They
right.
taught the kids,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. But my mother's lack of mobility, which was evident sort of 5 years ago,
Yeah.
has impacted, I think, her cognitive abilities too. So it's obviously, there's a lot of things that are connected. But when she stopped being mobile, it definitely seemed to throw out, from her memory, the dementia.
Yeah.
We started seeing an impact on that, and because she has a community,
Yeah.
it's right there.
Yeah.
And so I suppose there are many things that do contribute.
Yeah.
But I would think that the lack of a community, especially as you get older, would
Yeah.
be something that would play a huge part in your health and wellness.
Yeah, I think there's a subtlety as well. The isolation, and I was looking at some of the research in preparation for this conversation. Isolation and loneliness increases the risk of dementia by almost 40%, which is the equivalency of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, right? Now, obviously, a cigarette has a very different effect because
Yes.
it's reducing blood flow to the brain. But loneliness, from its own mechanism, leads to an increase in dementia in older individuals. And then there's the effects of mobility, which is a really interesting point you picked up on, which is we think about movement. And I know our last episode was all about movement
Yeah.
and the effects on
Yeah.
physical health. But the contraction of muscle and the increase in muscle mass and size leads to a secretion of what we call myokines. These are chemicals, peptides, neurotransmitters which are released from muscle when they are stressed, which have a beneficial effect and impact on health. Not just physical health, like insulin improvement of sensitivity, but even brain health. There's a specific one that comes to mind, which is called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
So this a peptide.
It's a peptide.
Yeah.
It gets secreted by muscles.
Yeah.
And it starts being secreted after about 15 minutes of activity. And it's released in the brain, where it physically increases the number of neural connections that the brain cells have with one another. And the power of the brain is not just its mass, but it's actually the interconnectivity of all of the different nerve cells that we have inside of the brain. So the BDNF, the peptide, actually increases the connectivity, and it improves memory, it improves focus. It's why people say, the best way of solving a big problem is to go for a walk, because this this BDNF starts to be secreted. And it's that lack of mobility in older individuals which slowly starts to degrade not just the physical health, but also the brain health through these myokines, which is a new area of science which people, in the medical world, we're now beginning to appreciate. So we ask the individual to work out, not just because of improving blood pressure or diabetes control, but also their cognitive function and their brain capabilities as well.
And isn't there a connection from gut to brain?
Yeah.
So
the gut-brain axis.
There really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so Melanie keeps telling me about this, and your gut health is so important. Okay, well, I understand. Be regular, but she's going, no, there's way more impact than just feeling bloated, or it does.
It does. So the gut has the single largest collection of neurons outside of the central nervous system in the body. And if you look at the embryogenesis of the gut, the gut and the spinal cord, when we're sort of developing as a fetus, and those early stages of development, they actually stem from adjacent parts. So there's a very, very strong linkages. And it's not unidirectional, which is the brain sending signals down to the gut. It's actually bidirectional. Okay. So it goes in both ways. So people focusing on, like Melanie keeps saying, improving the conditions of the microbiome or the organisms in the gut will allow the gut to break down the food, release peptides like short-chain fatty acids and other neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, which help improve brain function as well. So it's really important actually to take care of the gut. Yeah.
And I mean, we now as a family are discussing, her and I, about taking peptides. And I know in the previous podcast we've spoken about supplementation. Can you get everything from your lifestyle, or do we need to supplement? And I didn't realize that there are specific peptides that will focus on different parts or areas. I mean, it's getting quite technical.
Yeah.
But I mean, what are the areas that me as a 56-year-old man needs to start focusing on with regards to my brain health? Because I'm thinking, well, movement is enough, and as long as I'm sleeping well and eating well and moving, I'm good. But because I've just seen how my mother has deteriorated through the lack of mobility.
Yeah.
There's obviously, as Melanie keeps saying, as the yoga teacher and the architect, the whole structure is connected.
Yeah.
So I mean, we start the day, we don't follow a diet, but intermittent fasting is pretty much our lifestyle, because we wake up in the morning pretty early, we don't eat before we go to yoga, we drop the kids at school, we give them a smoothie, and maybe only after yoga do we have a sort of smoothie as opposed to or possibly a cooked breakfast. But we only eat at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the evening, the last time we've eaten is 6 o'clock at night. So the lifestyle dictates to us that we intermittent fast. But our coffee in the morning is a bullet coffee. So we add lion's mane, we add ghee, we add collagen, blend that up, and two of those, that kind of feels like enough substance in me. But I always thought that was just, to fill me up and keep me going until I had my smoothie, allow me to surf, allow me to go to yoga straight after dropping kids at school. But the brain function wise, I mean, taking a mushroom supplement, is it something that is beneficial, or am I just following a fad that some people are talking about on Instagram?
I think obviously there's a lot to unpack there, but the first message is the power of the ketone. When our body is in a fasted state, after a period of time, once we've exhausted the carbohydrates, which are naturally sort of circulating in the blood, and then the liver puts in a little bit more carbohydrate to make glucose, the body starts to change, and it actually activates a switch where it goes from just carbohydrate metabolism to fatty acid metabolism. Right? We call this metabolic flexibility. So having the flexibility to switch which fuel the body burns.
Okay.
And this moment typically happens after about 12 to 14 hours of a fast.
Okay.
And when that happens, when the body starts to burn fat as the primary fuel source, the byproduct of that is a ketone body. Right? And ketones are a very clean source of fuel. In fact, your brain and your heart preferentially prefers ketone as a burnt fuel source because it's very clean and it produces energy in a very pure form. And a lot of people often tells me, and I experience this as well because I do a lot of fasting, is how much clarity and ability of focus and thought there can be in that period of fast. And that's one of the effects is because of what's happening with the ketone body. So yes, the role of the intermittent fast has the benefits for physical health, but also from a brain health perspective. And you can accentuate that with caffeine. You can add to that ghee, which is a great form of omega.
So I'm not breaking my fast by, or not that I'm having a fast.
Yeah.
If I take ghee in the morning, that
Yeah.
that ketone that I'm looking for,
Yeah.
does that then disrupt the amount of time? Because if I've eaten at 7 by the
Yeah.
latest,
It's a very minimal disruption to
Okay.
the fast, but you're breaking it with something which is adding to the effect.
Sure.
And the effect of burning more fat is what you're going after. So actually, that bulletproof coffee or the ghee in the black coffee is a very, very effective way of doing that. I think the other thing that we touched upon there was mushrooms, and people watching this shouldn't be under the misconception. Exactly.
Joe, what is? Yeah, that's what Jonty was seeing at Backward Point. He
Exactly.
was like visualizing
He's
unicorns and, and spotting the ball coming before it was actually there. He's got this vision. Tripping.
These are functional mushrooms, and there are many which are available, and lion's mane being one of them. Lion's mane has an effect of, again, improving focus and concentration. So there is anecdotal evidence for sure, and there is weak data to be suggestive of this. And when I say weak, I mean we have to remember that the scientific world has pretty high standards in terms of randomized controlled trials, which are double-blinded, and that is the way we should be assessing molecules. And so there is some early suggestive evidence that lion's mane is a functional mushroom which has an effect, and certainly I hear a lot of anecdotal evidence to that, to sort of assist in focus, concentration, memory, etc. Yeah.
And then again, I mean, from Melanie's point of view, like wanting a farm in Goa, so we know where the food has come from, and try and control the nutrients in the ground, and it's not just been, or they're pesticides, and it's actually barren, and you need the pesticides and fertilizers to sort of grow the crops and things.
Yeah.
She's always not concerned, but again wants to know where the mushroom comes from, and again understanding the source of everything is something that she's always been focused on, and fortunately from my point of view, she's now kind of impacting the children and making a choice when you put something in your system, because it does impact. And I suppose from my age now, keep going back, seeing how it's affected my mother, just going, well, okay, so if I can do something that keeps me a bit sharper, because brain fog has never been an issue for me, because I sleep really well, and my nutrition is good, and I have mobility. But I notice it certainly when I come to India, and I'm doing corporate engagements and work. Sometimes it's later dinners, and it's going to sleep later, getting less. In fact, sometimes sleeping, is that a difference? If I'm falling asleep at 9 o'clock in the evening and waking up at 5, I'm getting the same hours if I fall asleep at 11 but wake up at 8. I mean, is there a difference again from a clarity, and is it just the amount of hours that you're sleeping,
No,
or is it
it's
also
not.
when you fall asleep?
It's when you do as well. So when we look at sleep data, and I suppose a lot of people watching would probably have some of these wearables, like the Whoop device or the sleep rings, etc. They're helpful because they can help understand not just the total duration of sleep, but also how much time are you spending in those different phases of sleep. And deep sleep as a phase is very important for physical repair. That's where insulin sensitivity improves, muscle repair happens, cardiovascular remodeling can occur. The REM sleep, the rapid eye movement, the eyes darting, and it's the dreamlike state. That's where the brain actually begins to heal and grow itself. And that's a very critical component of that. So anyone who's got these devices, to make it easy for them, I typically prescribe 7 hours or longer of total sleep duration. And in that 7 hours, 1.5 hours or 90 minutes should be spent at a minimum in deep sleep, and 1 hour or 90 minutes should be spent at a minimum in REM sleep. And what's interesting is that the sleep cycle that we constantly resetting the brain every 90 minutes at night is not the same every single time. So depending upon what time you go to sleep, what time you wake up, how long you're asleep for, your body and your brain will change the emphasis between deep and REM.
Okay.
And it quite often occurs that REM is the period of time which is deprioritized. Evolutionary, it makes a lot of sense. If you think about the basic tenets of being a human, we got to outrun the lion, we got to chase down the deer, and we've got to procreate, right? And all of those three are physically dependent upon the physical body. So the body preferentially wants the deep sleep rather than the REM sleep. And if we aren't getting our full quota, it'll start to shift towards that pattern. So oftentimes when I look at the data of a corporate athlete or an individual working, in one of these MNCs, and we look at the time they're spending, it's not enough in REM. And the next day they've got brain fog, they've got inability to make the right decisions, they're less of an ability to empathize, less expression of gratitude, less experience of joy. All the things that make us who we are as human beings are all lesser because they haven't had enough of that REM sleep the night before.
Yeah, I was always under the impression that you didn't have to outrun the lion, just outrun the person next to you.
Right.
Because then they would they would be lion food. So that's was my understanding of the use use of your speed.
Yeah.
Just be faster than the other guy.
Yeah.
Get away from the lion.
Yeah. But I think this is really important so that people understand that. You spoke about some of the supplements, obviously mushrooms or lion's mane being one of them, intermittent fasting being a second. I think if I think about some of the other supplementation, and it's interesting, we covered some of these in the last episode, but creatine is a very, very effective supplement for brain health. In fact, there are studies which are going on right now looking at the provision of creatine for people suffering from Alzheimer's, a form of dementia, and the slowdown in the progression of the disease by giving them the creatine. So when we think about creatine as a supplement, we should obviously be cognizant of the fact it can help grow your muscles, and we spoke about that last time, muscle health and bone health. But it's also very, very effective for brain health. So people who I see above the age of 60, creatine is on that prescription for them, not because of muscle, but specifically for improving brain function and improving brain health as well.
I mean, because it is the one sort of metric or parameter that as a cricket coach and someone who's been involved in 15 out of 18 IPLs, is that we always look at the physical health of players in a really stressful environment, and trying to create an environment where the players, we can sort of take a bit of the stress off them in ways that are possible. But the one area we're not looking at is the brain health or the mental health of players. And I think if we had the ability to focus on that in a big way, as much focus as we put on their physical health, I think there's an opportunity for players to improve their performances, because it is stress. And if you train your brain, it's a bit like, what should the 25-year-old Jonty have done? Would the 55-year-old Jonty tell him now? Yeah. And for me, it was about the recovery as opposed to just the exercise. Yeah. And I think we all in professional athletes or sportsmen and women, we're focusing on our physical health.
Yeah.
But there's not a great deal of focus on the mental health. And,
Yeah.
you know, what can we do, small things at home,
Yeah.
and not have to be, okay, that they're professional athletes, they need this.
Yeah.
We all need it. So what can we do to take away that sort of brain fog and improve our, is it just through diet? Is it a combination again of mobility?
I think, you know, a big conversation around this is the technology. I was just thinking back actually a few seasons ago for some of the IPL that I was doing, some of the IPL work that I was involved with. We had asked all of the players to use the sleep ring, so that we could actually show them how much time they're spending in the different zones. Because oftentimes players maybe don't believe it, right, until they actually see the data. And then the simple act of showcasing, you know, you had that drink the night before, look what it did to your REM sleep. But from a tech perspective, I remember this very specific case where one of the coaching staff was telling me about, there was a young player who was spending a lot of time on his mobile phone, endless scrolling, like I suppose a lot of the younger generation do these days. And then developing some addictive behaviors around gaming, and again going down that whole rabbit hole of online gaming on their mobile devices, ultimately eating into sleep time, affecting REM sleep. And no wonder the cricket effects, you know, on the field were beginning to show because of that. And so sure, we should be talking about eating well and sleeping properly, etc. But I think a big conversation in society today is how much time we're spending just on that endless scroll and the competition this has with our brain for sleep. Who was the Netflix CEO? He said many years ago that my biggest competitor is not the other OTT platforms, it's sleep. And that has profound effects on society.
I think they're winning some points.
For sure.
The online content is winning the battle against sleep.
Yeah. Did you see that in your IPL times? Tech, how do you balance the relationship on tech with some of these young players?
I think that's obviously because there were no wearables that were a part of the team preparation and sort of team conversation around it. You don't see players much in the morning, you know, and I suppose the difficulty there is you finish a game around midnight after all the press conferences and post-mortems and team celebration at the venue, and then you get to the hotel and then the brain is going, even as a coach, you're kind of replaying scenarios and what we could have done or should have done or did do well. So sleep is always something that, and the recovery of it, you know, when we're planning travel days as a coaching staff, as management, we're going, okay, so we need the players to sleep. So you can't afford to have a flight until 5, 6 in the evening because you want them to have a lot of sleep. But we never know what's going on. Because we sit in the same situation where I'm watching TV because I'm not going to go to sleep anyway, but I don't give myself a chance to go to sleep. I mean, I've seen how effective reading a book to Nathan is in the evening. You know, if I read for half an hour, I get back into, put the kids to sleep, turn the lights out. India's reading her own book. Nathan and I are reading, and then I'm ready for bed. You know, if I'm on my own, I'll put a TV on just for company, and suddenly I'm wide awake at 12 o'clock at night. You know, and it does affect my sleep. And I'm always, okay, well, I'm only here for a week or 2 weeks, and I'm away from home and it's fine because I'll get back into the rhythm again. But it's, you know, if I need mental clarity, we never really watched the players from that perspective because we didn't have the wearables. And that's three things I look at now on my watch. It's the sleep, it's, you know, movement, and that's generally the steps from that point of view. You know, and because if I've walked a certain amount of steps in the day, it means I've been moving, and that's really what I want to achieve. So you know, but it's not something that as a coaching staff we focused on. We just want to ensure the players didn't have to get up too early the day after a game, understanding that they would have got to bed quite late. But I think a lot of the players, you could see them emotionally. You know, they had been spending time on social media because a lot of the criticism, or you know, you can't avoid it. And then I think as coaching staff, we were always, and through the pandemic where it was just us, it made us realize that we're more than just skill, upgraders of their skill. We need to actually be more of a mentor and a shoulder to lean on, because that sort of support prior to the pandemic had come from family and friends who allowed access to the players. And if they weren't playing or not doing well, they had that emotional support. And just through the pandemic, it made us realize that, physically these guys are strong, but emotionally they're not. So, but can we do things to improve that or help that? Just creating an environment where they feel that they can, sort of psychological safety, not fear the failure or think, and get some support from senior coaches, senior players.
So that must be such an interesting journey, because you were involved with IPL right from season 1 or 2 with Mumbai Indians first, right? And so that would have been 2008 or 9? 2009, right? Social media then was barely anything, right? If anything, there was Facebook, but that was it. So you've probably seen the journey across as social media, penetration of mobile phones, again, not something that was there so much of in the beginning. Anecdotally, as you sort of step back and reflect on that, how have players' mental health changed over that period of time as the phone was introduced, the smartphone, and then social media? What patterns do you see?
Well, I still remember, because I had sort of a gradual retirement from playing cricket in South Africa. So 2000, when Daniela was born, our first child, I retired from Test cricket, but carried on playing the one-day internationals. So I would kind of arrive in the Test series, at the end of the Test series, and play the one-days, or at the start, play the one-days and then leave and spend the majority, because 1/3 of the tour was only the ODIs, and there was no T20, and then the Test would take over the rest of the 2/3 of the time away from home. So my sort of parting advice to the players was that if you're not going to read the bad news, don't read the good news, because there's nothing worse than, the first thing you do is before social media, when you've done well on the field, you get the newspaper delivered to your door in the hotel, you open the door and you look and you read about how amazing you are. But that same journalist 2 weeks later saying, what is Jonty Rhodes? He hasn't delivered, he's fielding well, sure, but he needs to score runs, and you get upset. So my advice was always, don't read the good news if you can't handle the bad. It's such a balance, you know. And now you could just choose not to read the newspaper. Now it's so difficult because players are spending time on the phone. And the interesting thing, and we speak about the importance of community, and we think it's just relating to old people, our parents, but cricket team is a community. And since the smartphones have come in and social media, it's less of a community. Sure, you work hard, you train hard, you play, you spend a lot of time together, but there's no time away from cricket together. And that was really evident, that you could connect with players who had similar passions and interests outside cricket, whereas now you don't, because that downtime is actually on your phone. So yes, we train hard, we play, we spend a lot of time, but the downtime is never together. And that's been interesting, because and I think, if anything, it certainly leads to stress and pressure build up, because there is no real outlet. We don't do things together away from the game, and that's been a huge change. You have very strong team core and unit, and guys that did things away from cricket because they actually spoke to each other about it, or you went and pursued these different activities, and that doesn't happen anymore. That's been a big change.
Same in the corporate world. I think the pandemic now, with the remote work that's come in, often I find, especially when I'm like you, brought in for team dynamics, and obviously I'm looking at it from the health perspective, but you have people who are meeting transactionally online for short periods of time, and then they sort of disappear, and then they come back again and they disappear, and those true relationships are not being built out, and therefore there's fragility, no psychological safety. I suppose resilience takes a big hit because of that. I mean, that might be one contribution towards why we're seeing so much change in the workforce as well.
That's from a cricket coaching point of view. This is my first IPL, so I've missed 3 out of the 18, and first time in a long time again that I've had a break away from that environment. And it's been interesting because when you're involved and in it, it is kind of all consuming.
Yeah.
And you can understand the reason for the players looking to withdraw. But, if you're looking from a mental health perspective, I don't think we're adding enough value in an environment. The coaches spend a lot of time. That's interesting.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time talking to each other. And it's
Yeah.
not just in meetings. It's
Yeah.
at breakfast, we'll sit and chat. But a lot of the players don't make it to breakfast because you're giving them the time to recover,
Right.
and they don't have to be down, or
Yeah.
they'll have breakfast in their room because there's fans in the lobby
Yeah.
or of the reception of the hotel, and they don't actually want to deal with that
Yeah.
first thing in the morning for them,
Yeah.
even if that's at 11 a.m.
Mm.
But the coaching staff spend a lot of time, and I think it's been interesting how I've always found that management has bonded pretty well.
Right.
And because even, cricket team, you think, it's a team, the players play together, but that actual community is not really there amongst the players.
Yeah.
Because they don't spend time away from the game. The coaches, or some of them might play a bit of golf.
Yeah.
And those guys stick together, and generally it's the overseas players.
Yeah.
Not just an Australian, but Australian, South African, New Zealander.
Yeah.
So they have that commonality or that community away from cricket, and you often see that bond. It makes a big difference just from an emotional, emotional wellness and emotional health in a setup that is very stressful for 10 weeks of their existence.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to change tack a bit now. I think, the pandemic has been such a big part of all of our lives. Something that I've spoken about quite openly before is the effect that COVID-19 had on me, both physically, but also a specific period of time where I had very intense brain fog, twice actually, with two separate sort of COVID-19 insults. And the realization that brought for me, and more empathy for people who suffer from sort of cognitive decline later on in life, because I noticed simple things like inability to remember numbers, having a conversation with someone and not remembering what the remaining part of the sentence would be, which for high functioning individuals like us, a lot of everything we do is cognition, right? So just how disabled I felt because of that. And I know a lot of people went through this, particularly folks who suffered from long COVID and the effects of brain health and brain fog on that. Something that I thought would be interesting for us to talk about, because I know sort of Melanie, she's obviously someone who practices yoga a lot and breathing. I thought let's talk a little bit about sort of the power of breath and how that can contribute towards better health, better brain health, the ability to slow down, be present. So where does that play into your day-to-day life? How are you guys building in sort of breath in your day-to-day sort of protocol?
Well, I think that the fascinating thing for me has been, Melanie is literally, because she's been doing yoga for over 20 years, yoga was her meditation. So in an hour, she would almost not notice the fact that she's been on the mat. Whereas for me, every asana as I transition, because we would generally do vinyasa, so it was more of a flow. So her meditation was generally on the mat. Although when I first met her, and we first started spending time together, I would often wake up and there was just nobody in the bed next to me. She was out meditating 2, 3 in the morning. And it was fascinating how, she was a single mom and she had to focus her every single day trying to juggle work and kids. And without her meditation, she would never have, I think, achieved everything that she did. She's an incredible woman. And I think that having a house full, having babies again, it stopped that sort of 2 a.m. meditation. But yoga does that for her. So the breath work, we've started doing breath work again through the cold water immersions. Right. So you jump in an ice bath, and without the breath work, there's no way you're going to survive it.
Absolutely.
Or the first minute, you're going to jump out again. And that was something that we started doing prior to the pandemic. And again, that sort of the box breath is the only thing that if I'm needing on an airplane just to kind of just slow down, I'll just practice. That's the only real technique that I use with regards to, I don't hold my breath for longer.
Yeah.
I go when we live in Uganda, in Goa, there's a surf coach there who does sort of spearfishing, and he can hold his breath for 4 minutes at least underwater. I mean, it's incredible, and he says there's techniques to it, and it's not something that's ever driven me to, okay, let me improve this.
Yeah.
And I've just utilized the box breath when it came to the ice water immersion.
Yeah.
But they really have, because as a cricket player, when I was under stress, I mean, I used to pray.
Right.
And it's a similar thing, 'cause you slow things down, you take your mind off what you're trying to do on the cricket field. And it's interesting how important it is, but how little work that we actually do around breath work. So if it wasn't for the cold water immersion, I don't think I would have even gone to box breath and understood the importance of meditation, of breath work, because Melanie, as a full-time yogi, she understands that. Because for me, yoga was exercise. I was doing it for exercise and mobility, and that's all I was trying to achieve. And without, the yoga teacher, stop breathing through your mouth. I'm panting heavily, and not understanding the importance of breath work. Can people add breath work to their existence in a corporate environment, and does it make a difference? I mean, if you do 2 minutes in a day, are you wasting your time, or those small things, do they add up over months and months and months?
No, inevitably they do. I was smiling when you said box breathing, because that's the technique I use every time before I step up on stage to speak. I get the little bit of the flutter, and I use that just to calm and ground right into the moment, and then sort of I step on stage. It's such a powerful technique, and so simple in its effect. When individuals have a wearable device, there's a very nice little feedback loop that I use as a illustration for folks to see how the effects of this can have on their physiology. So if we're looking at their resting heart rate, and it's beating along at, say, 70 beats per minute, and then we do a box breathing exercise in the workshop, and then immediately they can see how their resting heart rate has now fallen to low 60s. Very quick feedback loop. The other one, which is very effective, and that's more long term, is heart rate variability, HRV, which is the body's signal for how stressed it is. And this is an inverse score. So the higher the HRV, the better, i.e. the less stressed your body is. Again, I use it a lot for folks who are recovering from a acute illness, or even sort of in sports, athletes, helping guide how much to push the body.
Can I ask, because why does my watch tell me when I sleep? Why does it give an HRV reading? Is it all throughout the day? Or
you get an HRV throughout the day.
Okay.
But the best HRV to look at is the one that when you're asleep, because that's when your body is in its true restful state. Right now, our cortisol is going to be high, adrenaline is going to be high, so it's going to artificially suppress the HRV. So looking at your HRV trend line overnight, over a period of a few days, can help us understand whether you're moving towards a more stressed state, and therefore you need to pull back a little bit, or whether you're actually moving to a better recovery state, and therefore you can push the engine, push harder. So there are two use cases there. It's the person recovering, and it's the athlete as well. And it's a really nice, simple biomarker to use, and all the wearable devices have it these days. And the breath work can be one of the interventions that you use to try and elevate the HRV and actually bring it up through that process. Yeah. So we've both mentioned box breathing. I think it's probably really helpful for folks to understand what it is. And maybe I'll just share the physiology, and then you sort of share what you do as a practice, so that anyone who wants to do it can also probably do it as well. Essentially, when we look at the body is really brilliant. It always has a yin and a yang. There are these two opposing forces. So we've got the fight and flight mechanism, which is sort of the stress response to get us prepped and ready to go. And then the body has what's called the parasympathetic, which is sort of the rest, digest, and slow us down. And it's this beautiful dance which is constantly happening between the two forces, which ultimately leads to our baseline level of stress. When there's too much sympathetic activity, we're stressed on. And if there's too much parasympathetic, then we're just sort of dull and low. So box breathing is an activation which is via the vagus nerve, which is one of the big nerves that comes out of the brain. And it innervates the heart, the lungs, the gut, all across the body to essentially slow it down and therefore allow the body just to ground itself and be more mindful and less in a stress state. So physiologically, that's how it works. And it's effective because breathing, or the act of breathing, activates the vagus nerve, slows the body down. But tell us a little bit about how you practice it in terms of the day-to-day.
Yeah, it was interesting because at last season's, or the previous IPL, so that's what now, 2024, I was ice bathing, and it actually became almost an addiction. I ended up ice bathing 3 times a day. So in the morning when I wake up, I get out to the pool, have some coffee, do my mobility around the pool or in the pool, and then get into an ice bath. Got all the other coaches involved as well. Some of the players started utilizing it, but it was the actual ice cubes that would blow me out, because the first day I got in, the ice had already melted, but we have a thermometer, so you could see it was 8 degrees, but there were no physical ice blocks. And I sat in the water, submerged myself, and the box breath was kind of 4 seconds in. Hold for 4, 4 seconds out, hold for 4. And it was comfortable because I'd been doing ice water swimming in Cape Town. And day 2, I got in when there was still a layer of ice blocks. And after 30 seconds, I jumped out. I mean, it was the same temperature. It's crazy what your brain does. Completely forgot all about my box breathing. And then, okay, Jonty, just aramse, relax, get back in the water and just focus on your breath. And it's crazy. It's something as small as that. 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4. And then every 2 minutes, I would then change my breath work. So then it would be kind of breathe in, and then out through my. In fact, the first breath work as well, when I first started doing the ice cold water immersion, was just breathe out through your mouth. Which is, when hot yoga, we're told don't breathe through your mouth because internally it's heating up your system. So I don't know if the yoga teachers are trying to get us to breathe through the nose or not to panic. But it really was interesting because when I first started doing the ice water, the cold water swimming, that was I was told to do, just almost not hyperventilate, but breathe out through your mouth. And then once I was accustomed to getting in the cold water, the first breath work was then all just about slowing down, that fight or flight, countering that with the box breath. So that 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. And it's been something that I don't do unless I'm getting in the water. And I dive straight in. Melanie, when we swim in the ocean, she's a tall woman, and she grows taller, kind of as she walks deeper into we have an ocean, like a tidal pool. So the water comes over the wall, and it's seawater, and it's cold. And she just like tiptoes, trying to keep as much of her body out the water, where I dive in, because straight away once I'm in, if I feel it's too cold, I know that the breath work is something. Whereas the more you prolong it, kind of the worse it gets. But it's certainly something that the box breath has got me. And as a cricket player, as I said, prayer and meditation was. I didn't think of it as meditation. I kind of thought of it as prayer. But Melanie, for sure, meditation has been a massive part of her existence.
One of the interesting studies which looked at meditation and brain health actually came out, I think it was from the London taxi drivers. They have to pass that exam because they're not allowed to use GPS, right? And they have to know all the lanes of London without using a map, and the shortest route between 2 spots. And I remember seeing something that came out of one of the US universities many years ago, where they found that the taxi drivers who meditated actually had a very significant increase in the size of the brain associated with memory, which is what we call the hippocampus, to the tune of somewhere like 20 to 40%. So meditation has very profound effects. on brain health as well.
And is there a certain length of time that you need to meditate, or if you meditate for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, is that sufficient?
I don't know. I'm not sure if there is a dose-dependent response to it. Certainly it would affect, or the effects would be based on what we're trying to achieve. But I've individually found that just doing 3 or 4 cycles of box breathing can just sort of bring my heart rate down to a point that I feel much more in control of a situation. But certainly if you're looking at brain health, then probably longer durations as well. Measuring stress is another thing which often comes up in conversation. We spoke briefly about sort of 2 biomarkers that I like to look at. One is the resting heart rate, and the other more pointedly is the heart rate variability. But there are other sort of surrogate markers that one can use. It's a little difficult because obviously the brain is sitting inside the head, inside the skull. So we're not sort of asking people to do imaging and scans. But a blood test where we look at sort of the rise in cortisol levels in the morning. Typically we like to see cortisol levels go up, which is a normal physiological response. But then we want the cortisol levels to come down over the period of time. And there are many people whom the levels are elevated anyway, and it stay up, and then they don't drop. And that cortisol level staying high is something that can be a bad health effect over the course of a long period of time. That's sort of one of the stress markers. Interesting to know in the physical realm, with athletes, were there any sort of functional tests that you guys would do to see whether an athlete is more stressed or less stressed?
No. And, as a South African cricketer, former South African cricket player, I mean, you mentioned ICC events, and we'd start drinking water, worrying about choking, and no, South Africa just won the...
Oh, well done.
Thank you. You haven't brought it up yet.
We haven't.
Thank you. No, you haven't, but I'm just reminding you.
You guys won.
You won an ICC
final.
Hey, what do you mean? Come on, 1998, we won one.
Yes.
Some Champions Trophy thing way back when I was playing, but 27 years.
Is this when I saw you in black and white TV as a young boy?
You probably didn't. It was before TV.
Before TV.
Before. But it's been interesting because as soon as this, 2 World Cups then came and went, and this whole banter of South African team are chokers.
Right.
We had the opportunity to have a sort of a sports psychologist, but it wasn't a compulsory thing for the team.
Right.
And a lot of the players just went, no, because it's almost denial. If you go and sit with a psychologist, it means you have a weakness, and it was kind of frowned upon. And I think that's always was a big concern for me in the IPL, because you get young Indian players with so much respect for seniority.
Right.
It's a part of the system.
Yep.
And whether it's from home as well,
Yeah.
a lot of it is from home. I mean, my father's a school principal, and when I was at school, corporal punishment was a thing. So he was the one who would administer the sort of caning or whatever when boys were naughty, as they do.
Yeah.
And so I knew discipline and respect, and because that was a big part of our growing up as 3 sons in a headmaster's house. But my real concern is that if I ask a player how they're doing, or have they understood what I'm trying to get them to do, they'll always say yes. They'll never say no, or they don't understand, or can I repeat it, or can I slow down, or please explain it again, because then it's almost seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
So the physical skills, people pick it up very quickly, but there's nobody really monitoring the mental health or the mental wellness. And it was in my playing day, and it doesn't happen now. I mean, they will do trying to do team building things. So I think people understand the benefit of that community away from cricket. Can we do? And the players all just kind of roll their eyes. Another team building event. It's there for show, because there's no real investment in how is them, because it's quite difficult to what are the markers, or what are we reading, what is giving us insight into where the players are at emotionally and mentally. So it's a tough area to go to, because if you force players to do things, a lot of the international players and senior players are going, hey, I don't need this, or why? And it's quite difficult in a team environment. So and the second thing is that these younger players don't want to show you that they have a weakness,
right?
Just in case it then it impacts their selection in the team.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult area to be in.
Yeah.
And I wish it was, and maybe there are ways to, as you're saying with the sleep data.
Yeah.
This is impacting the players.
Yeah.
So without it being a counseling session, these are the things that you can do to make sure that emotionally and mentally, you are in a good space.
Yeah.
Given the fact that you are under a real high pressure environment for those 2 weeks, 10 weeks.
Yeah. But I mean, you had a very interesting sort of journey, because as a young child you had a proneness towards epilepsy and concussions. Tell us a little bit about that, and particularly the effect that it had on your playing career, and how it sort of directed you towards a particular mechanism.
Well, I mean, scientifically, I don't know enough about epilepsy, but from a neurological point of view, everyone is different.
Yeah.
And that was always the difficult thing about epilepsy. Once people became aware that I had a mild form, and they actually called it reflexive epilepsy. So I didn't take medication. Right. I wouldn't walk down the street and have a seizure, or be at home and have a seizure. I needed to get physical contact on my head.
Right.
So if we were playing at school and we were playing rounders or stingers or football and I bumped heads, I was a keen football player as a young guy. Yeah. Not a very tall kid, so I had to, competing in the air for a header. Yeah. I'd often clash heads with the defender, then I would literally get knocked out. So concussion was the issue. Wake up, dizzy, vomiting, not knowing kind of where I was, but no real issues with regards to, he's in danger, he might hurt himself, or he can't go swimming, because we don't know when the seizures are going to come. So as long as my head was not where I kept it out of the places that it wasn't meant to be, I was pretty okay. But when it came to cricket, I was the first kid in South Africa that actually wore a helmet. Okay. I know these days with hardball cricket.
Oh, while batting.
Yeah, while batting. So as a 13-year-old, I mean, I remember Hansie Cronje. I mean, he and I spent a lot of time as young kids playing against each other, and we were same age, 2 months apart, born. And he was told, go watch that kid with the white helmet from Durban or from Pietermaritzburg, and when I was at junior school, because he can play a bit, but the kid with the white helmet, they didn't know my name, just that guy with the white helmet. Nobody else had a cricket helmet. They had to get it from the UK, so the sports shop in our town sourced one out of England, and that was it. So my father was a rugby player, and my younger brother played cricket and he played rugby, and I was prevented from playing rugby because of the physical contact nature of the sport. And at school, you had to play winter sport. So instead of playing rugby, I was playing football and hockey. Tennis, obviously, I would have played anyway. But the amazing thing is, the irony is that as a rugby player, I probably wouldn't have developed my fielding skills because of the ability, the sort of lateral movement, the ball in the end of the hockey stick, the awareness that football gives you when you're being marked or finding the gap. So all these, the epilepsy, and the amazing thing, people didn't know, because my parents weren't trying to hide it. They knew that as school teachers that children can be nasty to each other. Right. And they never hovered. I mean, and that's the philosophy Melanie and I have had with bringing up our own children. We don't kind of hover around like kids, don't do this, don't do that. And that's where I'm really grateful for, because while they prevented me from playing rugby, they let me do everything else. And it was a case of sort of, once you understand your limitations, you can go other avenues. And it was amazing how not playing rugby certainly helped me and developed me as a fielder. We didn't have a fielding coach. It was just from the other sports that I played. But then being involved with, when I dived into the stumps in Australia in 1992 and to run Inzi out, and with the photographs, all the Australian press was saying, wow, because they play rugby in Australia, you must be a scrum half, or what position do you play in the rugby field? And I just said, no, never played, because I had epilepsy. So nobody knew I had epilepsy in South Africa. No one knew that I had epilepsy, because we hadn't made a big deal of it, because as long as put my head in the right place, I was fine. But after that, I worked with the Epilepsy League in South Africa, just as an ambassador, talking to, because it affects people of all ages, and out of nowhere, a lot of them. And the hardest part was that initial medication, trying to find the dosages and how terrible it made people feel. A lot of the young kids were in Durban, they were surfers now, they couldn't swim on their own, they couldn't be in the ocean on their own. People driving to work now, couldn't drive. And it was quite interesting, so somebody who was affected by it in such a sort of mild manner. I felt a little bit embarrassed because people asked me about epilepsy. I said, no, it didn't really affect me, because seeing what, how it had impacted the lives of other people. But just from a brain perspective, you can't just say, okay, have one of these before and after a meal and you'll be fine. It was trying to find the dosage for each individual and how long it took them to adapt. So, so it didn't impact me, but I have seen, through my work with the South African the National Epilepsy League, how it has impacted so many people. The brain's, I'm always nervous of damaging my brain, but I think in our daily lives we're damaging it, and we don't understand that it's not just a blow to the head that's damaging our brain. It's our lifestyles, and I think, again, the more people who understand that the lifestyle and the habit you start incorporating into your life, into your existence as a 30-year-old, as a 40-year-old, it's not just when you're 60 or 70 you need to start changing things, because I still think my lack of discipline in certain areas is because I didn't need to be disciplined as a cricket player, because I had the strength and the speed and all of that, and I recovered quickly. So there's certain areas that I really wished, but understanding the importance of keeping your brain healthy has certainly been something that's been with me for a long time.
Yeah, certainly the dementia at 70 has begun from your 30s and 40s. I think thinking through what we've spoken about today, what are some of the practical things that people can do to look after their brain health? Number one, we spoke a lot about sleep and the importance of good sleep, not just the amount of time, but having those specific phases of sleep. Really interesting for brain health. The second thing we spoke about was what you eat, making sure that you're putting in the right types of fuel, good fats, good proteins, good fibers, looking after the microbiome so that they can do their work to improve brain health. That was the second. The third is movement and the importance of staying mobile, strength training, aerobic work for brain health. We spoke about breath, the power of breathing and the role it plays on improving stress levels or reducing stress levels. And the fifth, which is where we began, which is on connection, which is human relationships and conversations and faith and the bigger things that are out there in life, which allow us to be so integrated with one another. So I think if we can look at all 5 of these aspects, anyone watching this will hopefully be able to instill some of those practices and hopefully have a better brain health for it as well.
Yeah, I think my takeaway always when talking to you and trying to understand, what are the adjustments I need to make, and knowing how difficult it is to switch things on and off, but just a small thing you can adapt and just keep doing this every single day allows you to start today, and as opposed to, okay, I'll do it at the end of the week or when I've got time. When do we have time? When I'm 60, but like you said, it starts at 30 and 40, and it's small things that add up. And I mean, I really have seen the benefits of that. I've seen the difficulty in changing habits, but I've seen the benefits of just doing one thing. That that incremental growth for me has always been something that I've looked at, as opposed to changing one thing overnight, because it's just not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, on that small yet powerful point, perhaps time to bring this episode to an end, and we'll see each other soon.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Join us every week on YouTube and wherever you catch your podcast episodes.
So do a Jonty and catch us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.